We are.
Good. Chetzquetz, everybody. Chetzquetz, Petia, Lemlumsh. Thanks for being here today with us. My name is Mike Derglow. I am the climate change coordinator, like Sean said, for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and I'm also the co-chair of the Crown Managers Partnership, part of the group, or the major part of the group that's putting on this workshop. And the workshop today is about riparian, aquatic, and wetlands. So those places that are important, significant to us for our food gathering, our medicines, all these places out here are very significant for us. So this is really, we had a workshop about a month ago where we invited the elders to a listening session, is what we called it, to go over what we were talking about in these workshops. And there's going to be 7 total workshops. This first one we're having virtual because we really didn't want people driving on the bad roads and going up to Browning or up to Canada. So we thought we'd do this virtual, and instead of doing one whole day, we're going to do 3 half days. So today and the 8th and the 15th. So hopefully the 8th and the 15th will be down at the Longhouse. I'll set up down there with the owl and all that stuff. And then Sean is going to set up at the Elmo Hall. So he'll have that all set up for everybody. But with what happened in the last few days, I mean, we all know.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's kind of hard for us to hear you online when you're facing away. It was just getting a little choppy.
I'm talking to them.
Okay, great. Just so you know, moving forward.
All right. Where was I? Plan B, I guess, would be here, just like we're doing today. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys coming. We'll have lunch available for everybody once we get done. So with that, anything else, Sean? DeFrant, do you want to say
me?
What was you gonna say in Elmo?
Oh man, I don't know. No, thanks for. I'm glad for the turnout. We got a couple more people showing up. That's great. Yeah, thanks for being here. And hopefully it goes well.
There's a chair right here, Mike.
There's a chair. Yeah, there's a couple chairs.
Max.
We got some more folks coming in, so. With that, Sean, Finn.
Okay. You sure, Mike? Would you do you have a minute to introduce the folks in the room, or allow them to give a quick introduction of themselves? And if they'd rather not, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll do that. So we'll start here. You guys met. We'll start with Sean DeFrance.
Sean DeFrance, Forestry Program Manager. And we'll go on this way.
Good morning. My name is Terry Tanner. I worked with the Crown of the Continent over 20 years ago, talking about the corridor all the way from Alaska to Mexico, the mountain ranges, and all the riparian, the rivers, and the creeks, all the way from Alaska to Mexico. I worked with the Crown of the Continent in Canada all the way down to Mexico. So I worked with the Crown of the Continent 20 years ago, probably with your boss, Sean. He probably knows me.
Thank you.
It's great to see you, and I'll pass it on to Jermaine White.
Jermaine White.
Hi-yo.
Is that it?
Retired.
Okay. However much you want to share.
I previously served as Information and Education Program Manager for Natural Resources for tribal government, and before that I was the began the first cultural resource protection program for the tribes.
There you go.
Lucy Vandenberg, I'm a member of the Salish Pend Oreille Elders Advisory Committee. Retired.
Language specialist. Language specialist extraordinaire. I'll keep going if you don't.
Shirley Trahan, I work for the Salish Kalispel Culture Committee in the language. I'm also a member of the Elders Advisory Board.
Maxine McDonald. I'm retired and I am on the Elders Advisory Board.
Rosalie Robertson, I'm the member of the Kashanka Elders Advisory Board, and I'm retired.
Stephen Buffalo, I'm part of the Salish Pend Oreille Elders Group. I'm still working. I'm currently the cultural advisor for the tribal health department.
Sorry. Like Graham, I'm retired and I serve on the culture committee. I'm retired. Loretta Boots, the Kashanka Elders Advisory.
Steven Smallson, I've been working with Pend Oreille language for 22 years.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Smith. I work for the Culture Committee, Salish Kalispel Culture Committee, historian and geographer.
I'm Jan Gardapi. I also work for the Salish Kalispel Culture Committee, and I am the education outreach person.
Good morning. My name is Sadie Keown-Stops, and I'm the director for the Salish Kalispel Culture Committee. And our elders might tell you they're retired, but they work really hard every day to continue for the continuance of our culture, language, and history.
Right.
Is that everybody?
No, we got two back here.
Oh,
I'm Kenneth Shorts. I'm Mike Bigelow's intern. And
what are you doing?
school. Oh yeah, I'm also in the right now in the hydrology program at SKC, and next year I'll be in the master's program.
Fancy Dupuy, Kashanka Cultural Elder.
Thank you, not much.
I didn't have a blanket.
I asked Stephen if he would start us off in a good way this morning.
Salary. I'm not just here for what you get to. Now there was John, she's got stuff there. And has to get squash. It was the custody was squash. Come here, back confirmation to test them. Especially to conference to get courses. It's uncertain to what we is supposed to confirmation. I asked the creator to help us out today, and we've been after this for how many years? 22 years, 25 years, and thank you for that. That's my prayers for today.
Language, Stephen. With that, Sean, but I'd really like to say thank you for coming today. And I was thinking, oh, we're gonna have maybe 3 or 4 people come out, but I'm really happy to see everybody this morning. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, got really stuffed. Working on our leftovers now, so. With that, Sean, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And I also thank everyone in the room with you for joining us today, for sharing such incredible wisdom and knowledge that you've all developed over millennia through your indigenous networks. And we're really going to strengthen and build upon that today, hopefully with all of our contributions. Before I turn it over to Quinn here, I just want to remind folks, if you're joining us individually, please introduce yourself by putting your name and your affiliation or location in the chat box. We'll be using that as part of our record for this documentation here. If you are in a room with multiple people right now, please make sure you capture everyone's who's attending here. So we surely being respectful for all voices. Okay, thank you again today. I'm going to turn it over to Quinn Shirtliff, who's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing today and kind of establish some the way that we're going to communicate.
Do you want to do any live introductions of those on Zoom or just in the chat? Are you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be a real kind of logistical challenge to try and go through everyone and provide their personal introduction. So please use the chat box to do that. I apologize, but it's just a matter of expediency.
Okay, super. Well, I will. So I'm Quinn Shirtliff. I'm with the analysis team. We've been helping to prepare this workshop here, a series of workshops. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, you should be able to see. I'll make this presentation mode so it's easier to see. All right, just my job is to just kind of give us just a really quick overview of what's going on today, what the objective is and the agenda. So big picture here, the purpose of these 3 sessions is to bring together both Indigenous and the Western knowledge holders to co-create a plan for coordinated conservation and monitoring across this whole landscape, the crown of the continent ecosystem. So overall, we've got, as Mike indicated, we have 3 sessions planned. We hope that everyone will be able to attend all 3 or at least as many as you can. Today, the purpose today is to determine how to measure the health of the three features in the crown of the continent landscape: the riparian, aquatic, and wetland. We're going to be relying on, you've been invited because you're experts in at least one, if not all 3 of these. The reason we're doing this is because this is going to set the stage for setting goals across the crown of the continent, for tracking progress and being able to eventually demonstrate the impact of our actions. Next Monday will be, the purpose of that meeting will be to identify effective management activities so that we can improve these, what we call RAW, the riparian, aquatic, and wetland features. So a lot is happening across the crown of the continent, and we recognize that the team here has done a lot of digging into all the different management plans, dozens of management plans to extract the information, the activities that are being done, and we're going to use that as a starting point. And we want the groups to be able to come together, figure out see kind of from, step back and see all the activities that are happening, get your input, perhaps there's gaps, and then figure out where there are opportunities to coordinate better, where there might be gaps in terms of activities that are not being done for important features, that kind of thing. And then the third Monday on December 15th, we'll come back together and select a handful of these the actions that we've decided on that could be scaled up, and to create what we call a theory of change for each of them. Essentially, that is us taking the strategy and saying, what would happen if we implement those? Let's think through our assumptions of what results we need to get to go from, hey, we're going to do this across the region, to we're going to improve wetlands, and we're going to see improvements in the aquatics. And we want to kind of outline those assumptions, and that will set us up so that we can, again, so we're ready to monitor those results that we expect to get, and both in the short term and long term. And we'll be talking about, we hope this is not a once and done type of a thing, that we're going to encourage you all to continue to be part of this collaborative working group, so to speak. All right, just a couple of things. This is a different format. Some of you, this may be a very strange format to be meeting this way, in a Zoom meeting, in a three-hour virtual session. So just some things to keep in mind as we do this, so that it's as successful as possible. First of all, I hope you will feel empowered to fully engage. You've been invited here for a reason. Everyone has something to contribute. And so please, all input is equally valued. Please contribute, especially in your breakout groups, that kind of thing. During a presentation like this, where we're all together, if you'll keep your microphone muted, that will keep the barking dogs from coming in the background, that kind of thing. But then when we're in a working group, we'll be sending you to different breakout groups. Those with Mike, in person there, you'll be in your own group, and we will, in that case, unmute. And we want to simulate like we're sitting around the table talking about these things. So have your camera on if possible. Sometimes you don't have the bandwidth to do that, or there may be other reasons not to. But when we're in breakout groups, try and have your camera on, the microphone unmuted as much as possible, so that we can just talk and chat. If you need to step away, this is a 3-hour meeting. That's fine, totally understandable. You can do that. We do have breaks. I'll show you in the agenda here shortly. But if you need to, we understand. And eating is okay. Again, it's a long meeting, so don't feel embarrassed if you have to have something you're chewing on while we work. Here's a look at today's agenda. Here, after I'm done, Sean Finn will give us an overview of the work that's been done in the last few years to get us to where we are now. After he's done, unless he goes, if he goes really fast, we may push into the next one. But we have scheduled a break, which would be about we're expecting to be about a quarter after. And again, that we may be able to adapt that if we're ahead of schedule. But after the break, or once after Sean's done, we will go into our breakout groups, and that's where we'll spend the majority of the time today. And what we'll be doing is there will be a facilitator for each group, or a couple of facilitators, and we'll explain all that you'll need to do. But we want you to work together to identify key attributes. We'll define these, and indicators for landscape features. We want to be able to describe, how would you measure the health of riparian systems or aquatic systems, or across the landscape. And we need your help to figure that out. Within the session, or within your group, at about 11:15 or so, or whenever you feel like you need to, you can take a 5-minute break. Eventually we'll come back together near the close, about 10 to noon, and that'll give us just a few minutes to kind of reflect on how it went, what worked well, what breakthroughs did you have, maybe what struggles you might have had. We'll get some feedback from you on the session, and we'll give you a quick preview of the next session. And so we hope to be done by noon. That's what we're aiming for today. And so with that, unless any questions on any of that. Okay. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sean Finn, and I'll just click through the slides as you go, Sean. Go ahead and come off mute there.
Thanks, everyone, again for joining us today. And we know this is an important time, hopefully it's well spent for you. We're going to work together and continue the work of this landscape conservation design. I want to tell you, some folks on the call here may know that we've been working on this LCD for about 5 years here. We're up to phase 3, as you can see on the slide there. And it's a pretty involved process. Obviously, the Crown of the Continent is a very big, beautiful, and complex place. And so we're being respectful and honorable of the landscape itself by being slow and thoughtful and inclusive with all of our conversations here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today and to prepare you with the information that you need to help us make this next step into the landscape conservation design. As we've said already, there are 2 more sessions each of the following Mondays from 9 a.m. to noon. I hope you join us for them, but I assure facilitators that we're working with today will be meeting between these times to summarize the information and ensure that what we work on today is prepared and ready for us to take the next step. So, it's not repeat to the next month. It's building on what we do today. So please come back and we'll have additional information for you to work with. Okay. Lynn? There we go. So phase 3 of the Crown of the Continent landscape conservation design is being co-convened by the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, who Mike and Sean DeFrance represent here today with the folks in their room, and the Crown Managers Partnership. I'll explain to you in a minute how we got to this point, but recognize, that the tribal entities, the Confederated tribes, have a mission and vision for their lands and for all of the resources together collectively across this landscape. Many of those things are, more on the human health, social side of things. But if you look down at the bottom bullet there, right, providing sound environmental stewardship is an important component of it. And we all know this environmental stewardship is intricately connected with human well-being. And so along with the Crown Managers Partnership, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, the Crown Managers Partnership co-convened and actually spearheaded this landscape conservation design with their mission to collective stewardship of the Crown of the Continent ecosystem by collaborating on common issues, shared resources, and exchanging knowledges of all kinds, right? The idea is to transcend these borders that we'll take a quick look at here in a minute so that we can care for all of the lives, lands, and waters in the Crown ecosystem. Sharing knowledges, integrating knowledges in a respectful and effective way is a huge challenge. I think we all recognize that, and it's an important, critical, important component, especially of phase 3 of the landscape conservation design. I'll be perfectly frank with you. We overlooked some knowledges for phase 1 and phase 2 as we took this very Western sort of technical approach. And we recognize that was not only a mistake, but it was a little bit hasty. And so we've been very intentional, that is the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and the Crown Managers Partnership over the last couple of years to rectify that, to ensure we were listening to all voices, that all voices and all concerns, all knowledges were being brought together. One example of that is the recent award from the American Ecosystem Restoration Initiative program, formerly known as the America the Beautiful Challenge, where the Confederated and Salish and Kootenai tribes were awarded $3.5 million for a project that was titled Biocultural Restoration in the Crown of the Continent. And that biocultural restoration includes very active work on whitebark pine, on bison habitat in the Bison Range, as well as wetlands and important wetland vegetation communities and species that have cultural and ecological significance. So a lot of this $3.5 million is going on the ground for conservation, but we also carved out some funds for a conversation that we're continuing today called this landscape conservation design. You can see there's many partners and many contributors to this project already, and we welcome you as being a part of this landscape conservation design. Next slide. Also, in ways that we've worked hard to share knowledges and improve the way that we do this, both in a genuine and respectful way, but also in an effective way, that we can make sure that we're sustaining human communities and the ecosystems that they are related to. The Crown Managers Partnership, which holds an annual Crown Managers Forum over the last 3 years, has very intentionally joined knowledges between Indigenous knowledges, Western science, and local communities together on this through these annual forums. First one, 23, held on the Indigenous leadership, honoring and caring for the Crown of the Continent. Last year, 2024, we had a forum in conjunction with the band, the Tanana Nation in St. Eugene, British Columbia. And that the theme of that Crown Managers Forum was water, the rope that ties the TP poles together. And my view here is one of the important words here, right, is working together. And in this particular case, thinking about water, which we return to today. Right. And then just earlier this year, we held the third Crown Managers Forum in a row that was very intentionally working on interweaving traditional knowledge and Western science for collaborative conservation. This is hard work, right? And we all recognize it. We know that we've not really done a very good job of it across the board for centuries, if not millennia. And so part of what we're going to do today and through phase 3 of the LCD is rectify, is to correct that. Next slide. And then finally, the LCD goals here. We've heard a little bit about this from Mike as well as Quinn here. But the LCD goals rely on cutting edge science, Indigenous knowledge, and modeling to increase increase the collective resilience of the waters, forests, and grasslands of the Crown ecosystem, sustain these healthy ecosystems by establishing and supporting partnerships. And also to recognize the leadership, history, culture, and traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples as we plan for the future. You see this little diagram on the right-hand side here. This is sort of a kind of a little way of trying to describe how we're bringing some of these knowledges together. Mike mentioned that we've had some elder listening sessions among Confederated Salish and Kootenai cultural committees. We were bringing that information forth. Also have done an extensive review of management plans and literature, looking at over 60 management documents for the Crown of the Continent and bringing them together and summarizing that information. And today we're at one of our expert workshops where we, again, are hearing multiple voices. These 3 things together are trying to help us understand what are the shared values across the Crown of the Continent, things that we all find important. What are our concerns? What do we see as potential threats to these values? And how would we go about addressing those threats? Where are the conservation opportunities? Where do we have opportunities to communicate, coordinate, collaborate, and work together? And then as we work together, how do we develop strategic approaches, strategies that lead to coordinated actions that ultimately achieve these goals you see on the bottom left? Next slide. So, that gives you an idea of where we're at and what we're thinking about here, but you're probably sitting there going, well, what the heck is a landscape conservation design? What is an LCD, right? And it's very simple. We just described a lot of it. It's a partner-driven approach to achieve sustainable, resilient landscapes that meet the ecological and social needs of current and future generations. Hopefully that resonates with everyone in the room. But you might be thinking, well, I'm a little skeptical of LCD. I don't like those capital letter things, but I want to assure you, although it is an emerging approach, right? It is well defended in the scientific literature, right? It has been used across the nation. As you can see in that little picture there, right? It's really about collaborating and sharing knowledges, working together to understand these ecosystems. The map that you see in the center of the screen there shows you that there are landscape conservation design type efforts that are occurring throughout most of the continental US and in important portions of Canada and Mexico as well. So we are forging ground, just like these other landscape conservation designs out there, to understand how we secure these things with all voices being heard. Okay, and one more click. Although there's a lot of this stuff going on, and there's a lot going on today, obviously we're very focused on the Crown of the Continent ecosystem. 18 million acres with many, if not all, of our traditional communities intact. Large groups of ungulates and carnivores that are functioning the way that they have. The mountains, the rivers, and the valleys are all here as they were thousands of years ago, and we want them to stay that way. Next slide. So why do a landscape conservation design here? Well, I could go on and on about the why, but the simple thing is we all value these resources, and if they weren't here in the future, everyone would suffer either economically or emotionally or spiritually. In the recent version of the Crown Managers Partnership Conservation Framework, I pulled out this statement that said a multitude of land managers means a wide array of missions, mandates, policies, and access to resources. Right? We all know that it's a complex place. It's jurisdictionally in terms of who manages what lands or what wildlife or what waters, right? It's very complex, and you see that on the map in front of you. With such a variety of jurisdictional players, there's a risk of over-allocating resources or even managing at cross purposes, right? That is something none of us want. We don't have enough money to be wasting money on things that are not going to be effective. The landscape conservation design seeks to view the Crown as a whole unit, and create a conservation roadmap to ensure the long-term health and resilience of all of these things that we value. That's why we're here today. One reason why we're here today. And the Crown Managers Partnership has committed to achieving this landscape conservation design here in at least a 10-year framework, starting with the 2021 to 2025 conservation framework, where we identified that we would unite all conservation priorities through a landscape conservation design. And the very fresh off the books, thank you, Danny and Valerie and others who worked on the new version of the conservation framework. You can see we still have goals for landscape conservation design, including workshops, listening sessions, and other community-focused engagements. It's what we're doing today. We're actually, achieving these things that we set out to do. Well, again, we're kind of thinking a little bit more. It's a big, complex thing here. So the Crown of the Continent Landscape Conservation Design, as we've said, we've been working on this for about 5 years. We've had a number of various kinds of committees and input from all over the geography, specialists that deal with wildlife and natural resources, but also administration and communications and those kinds of things. It is the broad tent, and we're looking for all voices here. Together, early on, we established a vision, ensuring resilient, connected landscapes that support healthy ecosystems and human communities. But at its heart, a landscape conservation design is inclusive. We've talked a lot about that, right? About including all voices and ensuring that we're inclusive to all parts and components of the Crown. They're holistic in the sense that we try and ensure that every piece and part of the Crown is conserved. Nothing is more important than others, and therefore we don't use the word priority, and we don't think about things in terms of priority. You'll see a list of species and habitat types here in a few minutes. They are not the priority species, right? But they are also important to us. And the other thing that you'll see about these things that we're going to work on today, particularly riparian, aquatic, and wetlands, right, is that we have really good information, really good data for these things. Other kinds of systems and species, we don't have that kind of information. So even though it might seem, well, that's a priority, that's not what the intent of the LCD is, to say these things are priorities over others, but rather they're sort of messengers from the natural world that can speak to us as well. It's because we've had data and we have information about them that we're able to work with and to use together with these features on the landscape to help conserve them. So again, it's holistic. It doesn't mean we're picking our favorites, okay? It's transparent in the sense that everything that we do is shared broadly. You will see the website to the Crown Managers Partnership or the Crown of the Continent Landscape Conservation Design and other slides here. We document this stuff all the way to the best ability that we can. So although we're going to skip a lot of stuff today, if you're looking for background and want to see that transparency, go to the website. You'll see in a few minutes. And then iterative, right? We know that all the great work that we do today is only going to be so good as if we're able to follow up on it and make sure that we can confirm the information is accurate, that the knowledge that we share is useful and going to be used well into the future. So we'll always be continuing this dialogue. Okay, next slide. So here's one of that list that I was going to tell you about in the middle of the screen. We call these things the features that we selected, right? We have a list of species, white bark pine, bull trout, mule deer, wolverine, etc. Yeah, you can see them. We all know these are important components of the landscape. They're not priorities, but we also have really good data, so they can speak to us as well. We can use that information to make those communications. And so we think of them as representatives of the broader ecosystem, representatives of the broader wildlife and fisheries communities. Those particular species we're able to really kind of interact with through the information we have from them. And that's why we selected them. They're not priorities, again, and I'll stop saying that, I think, here, but the idea here is that these things talk to us. You can also see that there are course features. Today's workshop, give me a click here. We'll be focusing on these wetland, riparian, and aquatic systems, right? The landscape conservation design is part process and part products, and part of the process was picking out some things that met these criteria that helped us understand the landscape better. We've also developed these situation analyses that you see. Some of the products include maps of conservation opportunity called spatial designs, and we're not going to talk about that too much today. That's sort of another element of the landscape conservation design, is thinking about where on the landscape we have the best opportunity to conserve these things that we're so interested in. Now, what we're going to focus on, and give me a click here, Quinn, over the next couple of sessions during this virtual workshop, is developing strategies. And this is a real wonky view of it, but it gives you an idea that we're going to develop strategies. As Quinn said, we're going to really unpack our assumptions and what we really know about these particular strategies and how effective they can be. And ultimately, we're going to work together to develop a pathway from where we are now, roadmap from where we are now to where we want these features to be in future, for future generations. And right at the bottom of the screen there, you can see the website if you want to go visit and get more information on all of this stuff. Next, checking my time here. Ultimately, the LCD has some outcomes. As I said, we've been working on this for 5 years. Many voices, indigenous and community members, professionals, researchers, and managers have all kind of contributed to this. We're ultimately trying to build strong relationships, respect for many ways of knowing, communicating, coordinating better, right? Develop landscape scale conservation action strategies that we're going to start today that reference millennia of indigenous stewardship in this landscape, that also reflect recent adaptive management approaches where we're learning as we go, and bring together cultural, social, and ecological objectives so that we have a holistic understanding of this landscape and what we should do about it to keep it in the functioning ways and providing the resources that we all love and need. Okay, another ultimate outcome is these maps of conservation opportunity. I mentioned that today. We're not going to talk much about the mapping. We'll get into that later again. And then all of those maps will be on this interactive website, this web map that allows dynamic communication. So when you're meeting, you'll be able to look at the maps and the strategies and think, is this the right thing for this particular place? It's holistic in that sense. It's a full body of information. And ultimately, we get this roadmap. Oh, wait a second. Other communication tools that you see down on the bottom of your screen there. The one on the bottom right there, Mike is very familiar with, and probably others. It's a diagram of the life pathways that was developed by Mike and others to communicate the important elements of the Salish and Kootenai communities, right? And then, some people like these really kind of ugly, wonky blue and yellow results chains or theories of change. But others prefer sort of a more graphical image. And so as a consequence of the LCD phase 3, we're going to be producing these multiple communication tools so everyone can see themselves in this landscape, and we collectively sort of describe how we work together to perform this conservation. Okay. Quinn went over some of this today, but I'll briefly remind you, right? We have 3 sessions. Today, we're going to particularly talk about key attributes and health indicators for riparian, aquatic, and wetland systems. And we'll go over these terms, but again, it's not so important that you memorize the terms and the definitions rather than you understand and help us all collectively understand what we can do and how we can move forward with conservation in a measurable way. Next week, we're going to talk about those conservation strategies and which ones are most likely to be successful when we scale them up to the crown-wide ecosystem. And then the following week, we will co-develop these theories of change. Yes, again, they're a little wonky, but they give us sort of that roadmap to talk about what do we do when, what's the sequence, what do we need to do before we do something else to ensure we're going to be successful. So that'll be 2 weeks from today. Hopefully, this is really kind of getting you excited about what we're going to do over these next 3 sessions. So again, today, identify key attributes and health indicators for riparian, aquatic, and wetland systems. We want these things to be measurable and informative crown-wide. Maybe not just the wetland behind your house, but what does that mean for all of the wetlands across the crown? We have some tools. I'll direct your eyes to the bottom of the screen here. Zoom that we're already using. Right, the mural board that we mentioned, there is a link in the chat box. If you have a free hand and you can move over to the mural board, you can do that now. It's where the breakouts are going, and we'll be going there in a few minutes. And we will also give you a brief tutorial about how to use Mural. It's not that tricky, but you know, you're going to have to get used to it. And it's where we're storing all of our information for all of these workshops over the next 2 years. There will be facilitators in each breakout room to guide you through the tasks that we're asking you to accomplish and to answer any questions or clarifications you may have. We give you a summary of prior LCD work to include potential attributes and indicators that we may select. They may not be useful, and that's okay. We're trying to pick out the ones we think are going to be most useful and effective. So you'll see a list, a pick list. Not complete. We may not need to come up with new ideas. But essentially, those attributes and indicators are there for us to start to think about and to work off of and think about what's going to be most effective for our geography, the crown and the continent. We also have shared knowledges and management plan summaries on the mural board. We'll probably get to them next week. But the most important tool that we have at our disposal today and throughout the rest of the LCD process is your knowledge, your expertise, and your creativity to find opportunities and consensus for the various tasks that we're going to undertake today. Okay, a few things to consider, and I might have kind of mentioned these already, right? LCDs are complex. We're not going to get it all done today, so everyone take a deep breath. We don't have to do maps and theories of change. We'll break it down into smaller chunks of work, okay? And it kind of gives you a little bit of narrow view of what the LCD is about. So I want to remind folks, if you want to find more broader details, go to the website. We try and communicate in the most transparent and way possible. But just kind of focus on what we're asking for today. And I think we'll see each other through, okay? Terminology and the language, the words that we use is always a bear. Appropriately in the crown, it's a grizzly bear, right? It's hard to use the same words over and over, and we don't necessarily all agree what they mean. So we encourage you not to get hung up on words like key attribute or feature. We'll give you some definitions here in a minute, just so that we're all kind of speaking similarly. But I want to make sure that you know that we're not insisting that you use these words. We want to understand the landscape as you do and bring all that information together. Okay. Also, the landscape conservation design uses this thing called the conservation standards approach to structure information, right? Develop these strategic approaches. That's where that weird looking theory of change came from. A lot of that stuff's going to happen on the back end. You don't have to worry about it. We got that stuff, and we'll convert that into communication tools that make sense for everyone. So just bring your knowledges, bring your best knowledges and expertise to the workshop. Don't get hung up on some of those details. We've argued about them for years, okay? So we got the argument done already, okay? So then recall, the LCD is iterative. We're going to get as much work as we can done over the next 3 Mondays. It's not going to be everything, we already know. But we're going to summarize that information as we go and share it all back with you for review and improvement to make sure that we're getting it right and to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the crown of the continent, all the important ecosystem components, wildlife and fish and peoples that live in this great geography. Okay, so here's a few details, and we're going to start with some of these definitions. Again, I'm not going to go over this ad nauseum here. I think we're doing okay on time, right, Quinn? Yep. Okay. But we want to make sure we're thinking about the same things, right? So I mentioned earlier, we identified, I think it's 15 features that the landscape conservation design is focused on, not priorities, but these are components of the landscape that I think we could all pretty easily identify. And we all recognize that they're important out there, right? So we used these things and we selected them through a structured process with the landscape conservation design leadership team that met for about 2 years to get this thing off the ground, right? So we set up a series of criteria, right? The relative concern. Actually, let me step back and say we started with a list of about 125 potential features on the landscape, species, ecosystems, communities, processes. And we looked at all of these 125 things and thought, well, which of these should we work on? We can't do 125. We have to pick some subset of them. They're not priorities, but they're important. So we might as well set up some criteria and select what's important. So you see in the middle of the page in there that's blue, the relative concern, whether they had some sort of protected status. That's helpful because if we're going to manage these things, it's helpful if we have, some sort of status on our side. Their relative social cultural importance, the data availability, and this goes back to the representation, right? We could have looked at every worm and bumblebee in the crown of the continent, but we don't have great information on those. So we'd really just be guessing, right? One of the reasons we selected these features is because we have information, and this is essentially these systems and these species telling us what they need, right? Telling us what's important to them on the landscape. And if it's important to them, it's important to all of us. And so that's why these features that we're going to look at represent the broader biodiversity. They represent the broader ecological and social functioning of our communities and our ecosystems. Okay. And then, of course, if we want to really understand if we're having an impact and the money that we're spending, the energy, the time, and the treasure, the talent that we have in these rooms on this call are spent wisely, we have to have a way of understanding whether our investments are going to have a return. So we needed to have some monitoring in place for the features that we were going to look at. So that's how we selected these things. And again, I give you a minute to take a look over them. And I think it'd be hard to argue that, any of those are not something that's important to the Crown ecosystem. And if we need to add some, like bison, for example, we will. And if we need to, remove some, I suppose we could as well. But the important point is that these are examples of things that we can work with. They're not more important or less important than another species. They're just the representatives of the biological and cultural diversity on the landscape. Okay, so now directing your eyes towards the bottom of the screen. I think if you ask somebody to point to a riparian system or an aquatic system, they'd be able to do it, but they can be really hard to define sometimes. So I added these definitions here to help you in the breakout rooms, right? So riparian, we're thinking about the plant communities that are adjacent to and affected by water, right? Whether that's perennial or intermittent water bodies. Riparian areas are usually transitional between the stream, right, and the upland areas, right? I think we all know them when you're in there, right? They're moister, they're more lush, those kinds of things. Aquatic systems, we're really thinking about subsurface and benthic communities of open water bodies. That's lakes, ponds, large rivers. They are typically devoid of surface and or emergent vegetation. So when you're looking at the aquatic system, you're just seeing the surface of the water. There's a lot going on underneath it, right? Okay, and aquatic features, they're important for a whole bunch of reasons, fisheries and other kinds of habitat, but they also serve as cold water reservoirs. And regionally, they provide that connectivity to allow fish and other organisms to move through the aquatic environment, access things like those riparian systems and wetlands, right? And then finally, wetlands, again, I think the way you know when you're in a wetland is when the bottom of your shoes are wet. If you keep going into the wetland, the tops of your shoes are wet as well. Right? These are low-lying areas where the groundwater intercepts the soil, or where precipitation is so abundant that it saturates the soil, marshes, wet meadows, and they are generally dominated by herbaceous plants and trees. Many of them have a cultural significance, whether that's for subsistence, whether it's for medicinal or spiritual, cultural values. That's why another reason why these wetlands are important. So that helps you think about what we're talking about when you get into your breakout room. Next slide. Okay, so this is what we've done to date. This is not what we're going to do today. This is how we prep this information for you for this workshop and all of the workshops. So for each of these features, all 15, including riparian, aquatic, and wetlands, we reviewed some 60 resource management plans, conservation assessments, and community-based planning. That includes documents that were produced by all of the tribal governments in the Crown of the Continent geography. So not only the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and documents that are relevant to the Flathead Reservation, but also documents from the Blackfoot on both sides of the Medicine Line. Likewise, the Kootenai and Tanaha bands in British Columbia, and even a little bit west of the Crown of the Continent here, right? So we reviewed these management plans and looked at them and kind of brought information forward and summarized them. We also have 20 or more recorded meetings of the Landscape Conservation Design Leadership Team that guided us essentially to the point that we got to today. We also did interviews and surveys with experts, more than 50 experts through formal interviews and surveys, and many, many more through informal communications, at meetings, on phone calls, et cetera, et cetera. So we had expert interviews that were put into this, right? And then we also looked at additional published and unpublished research about these features. So we made sure we know what we were looking at. After all of that review, we produced these fairly basic situation analyses that identified the shared values. Okay, they identified the urgent and pervasive threats to these values, right? What's eating our lunch? What are we worried about? If these threats get out of hand, we're going to lose the values that we like. So we wanted to make sure we identify them, understand how they interrelate, and then the relative extent of these threats, like climate change is happening everywhere, but maybe wastewater improperly handled is only affecting some of the wetlands, for example. So understanding, their intensity, their extent, right? And then also, as we went through this, well, we looked at these kind of boxes on the screen here, for example, and we said, well, what kinds of information do we have, for example, about pollution in our wetlands? Do we have enough information? Can this feature speak back to us and tell us what's being harmed, right? So that's how we selected these things, and that's how we developed these situation analyses. They framed the do today. We're not going to look at another one again today. Okay, now talking about what we're going to do again, and going over this a little bit. During this three-part workshop, our aim is to deploy all of our knowledge together, to synthesize our knowledges, to understand how we best conserve riparian, aquatic, and wetland resources so the systems themselves are resilient and healthy, and they support and sustain human communities, right? So we're really going to kind of get after riparian and aquatic wetlands, right? We're going to start by today by understanding these key attributes and health indicators, right, of these features. I've talked ad nauseum about what a feature is. It is a focal landscape feature, not a priority. It's something that we're going to look at, and it represents these features. When you bring them all together, they represent the full complement of biodiversity, ecosystem elements, social and cultural components. Are we missing some stuff? Of course. It's a huge, gigantic, and complex system. But these features that we selected are nice and broad, and they really speak to us with care and with data. Okay, now a key attribute, here's where we're really getting to where the rubber meets the road and the things we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes here. A key attribute is some aspect of a feature's biology or ecology, for example, riparian, that if that attribute is present, it means or it suggests that the feature is healthy and is functioning well. But if that attribute is missing, then it would lead to extreme degradation or even complete loss of the feature, right? Think about something crazy like overhunting grizzly bears, right? If the hunting were to cause such an impact, we may lose grizzly bears. It's not what we want. So that would be a kind of thing that would be an attribute, right? The hunting management, for example, right? Okay, and so those attributes are something that we need to define, because then the next step we take is we identify a health indicator, which is something that can be measured to tell us if a feature is healthy. So I direct your eyes to the right-hand side of the screen where it says, for example, there. Okay. Assume that the feature we were looking at is your body. Okay. Your body is the feature. We want to know if it's healthy or if it's not. And how would we do that in an efficient and cheap way? Well, one way is we can pick an attribute that we know is important to everyone's body and everyone's function. In this example, the attribute that we might have selected was the circulatory system. That's an attribute of the human body, right? If it's missing or altered, we're in big trouble. I don't think there's any argument there. But if it's healthy, right, we're probably doing okay, or at least our circulatory system is doing okay. Okay. So we recognize that the circulatory system is an important component of your body, right? But how do we know if it's healthy? Well, we could spend lots of money on some, a blood, panel, a blood draw, those kinds of things. But we have a very quick, efficient way to determine whether the circulatory system is functioning within a range of how we want it to function. And that indicator is blood pressure, right? It's not the only indicator of whether your circulatory system is functioning, but it's a good one and it's cheap and we know how to do it. And every doctor's office already has a blood pressure thingy that they stick around your arm, right? So there you go. If our feature is a human body, an attribute might be the circulatory system. That might be something we pick. An indicator of that circulatory system might be blood pressure. Now think about that in terms of riparian systems, aquatic systems, and wetlands. And that's what we're getting after today. Next slide. Okay. I think we have a few minutes for questions here before we are going to move into a break here. Is that right, Quinn? And you're on mute.
Yes. We'll go into break once we're done with questions here. We got about 5 minutes.
Okay, why don't folks raise their hand and I'll ask somebody from the facilitator team here to keep an eye on hands. And if you have any questions, see what we can do to address them. Well, either you were all asleep or my communication skills have improved greatly. Don't be bashful. Okay. I'm seeing some flashing here. I want to make sure everyone has a chance.
Communication skills are outstanding, looks like.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, very good. All right, so Quinn, I'll turn it over to you and we'll move on from here.
Recording the presentation again. I'm going to share my screen as well, so you'll be able to follow on the shared screen. As well as you can just go straight to the mural board yourself. So the chat, what I shared in the chat will drop you into this part, the mural sandbox, okay? And I'm just going to walk you through what we're going to be doing here today. Let me pull up, I lost my Zoom view, so I can't see you guys. All right. So Mural is a fantastic, it's a whiteboard. It's a digital whiteboard. Of course, those that are in person, you'll be using paper, good old-fashioned paper. This mural, for those that haven't used Mural, I put this little box in here so you can just play around. It's a safe place to double-click or try to use Mural as you want. You can see someone's already added some things here. You can basically you don't need to know much, except if you double click on anywhere in the mural, I'm going to double click here, you can create a box. And I'm going to, actually one other feature, I'm going to summon you, which means I can click on these little avatars at the bottom, show who you are, and I'm going to summon. And that means everybody is seeing my screen if you're on Mural. And you can do that, you can release yourself, I can release you. But that's a good way. If you're a facilitator during the breakout group, if you don't know where they are, just go and hover over their avatar and just click follow them. I'm going to follow Morgan Schultz. I can click on that, and now I see the same screen that Morgan has, and I can stop. So that's a nice little trick. But you can double click and move these little boxes around. You can see when I click on the box, there's all kinds of things I can do. I can change the color, that kind of thing. You won't have to do much of that. For the most part, all the boxes are provided. Like this little one that says example, all you need to do is double click on it and you can just start typing. That's pretty much all you'll need to do today. But just so you know, you can draw arrows from things, if you to other boxes, and you can get really fancy. There's a a toolbar over on this left if you want to add some kind of picture icon. But for the most part, if you can double click on a box and type in it, that's about all you'll need to know. Okay, so I'm going to take you up. I'll summon again so that I keep you with me. I think if you click around after I summon you, you can click off. It's a way of getting off of the tether that I have you on. I'm going to move you up to the top just to orient you to this little area. This is just a high level summary, if you want to refer to it, of the partners that are part of the CMP, conservation or the managers partnership. There's a map showing the scope. This all comes just from the online, the website. You can see the vision that it was developed for the crown of the continent, and these are definitions of what we mean when we say what's our vision. It's a description of the desired state, etc. So that's what these are here for. You can get a view of the different landscape or ecological features that Sean was talking about, and today, we're just going to work on the riparian, focus on riparian water and wetlands. Okay, so that's just here for your information. Here's the definitions of the 3 different features that Sean showed, so you can look at that. Now, where our work's going to be, I'm going to take you down to the panel here that says key attributes. So we've given you some definitions and such, but the exercise here for the first about 45 minutes is to try and narrow down and identify a small subset of key attributes for the feature you'll be working on. So we have a list of each of you, and we're going to divide you up into breakout sessions. When you go into that session, if you get put into the wetland session and you breakout group and you really feel strongly you need to be in the aquatics, let us know. We'll move you. But otherwise, we put you where we feel like we wanted to even out the teams, and so we had input. And of course, those with Mike and Sean in person, you'll be working in your own group to do this. But so a key attribute, just to remind you, the definitions are at the top. A key attribute is, as Sean said, an aspect of a feature, like wetlands, an aspect of wetlands, for example, that if it's present, it defines a healthy feature. If it's missing or altered, it'd lead to the outright loss or extreme degradation of the feature over time. So let me just take you down. All these things that are written in these boxes, these are ideas that came out of those 60 management plans that Sean talked about. And so I'm going to zoom in here. This is wetlands. You can see that there's ways you can measure the health of wetlands by water temperature, for example, or water chemistry. Perhaps the abundance, maybe that's the abundance of wetlands, the soils, that kind of thing. So these are things that have been called out in plans, and I even tagged them. If you hover over, like water temperature, if I hover over this, well, maybe if I hover over it, it should say, this is from the U.S. MPS Rocky Mountain, etc. network. That's from that plan. And this one's from the Swan Valley Land Protection. You'll notice down, we can talk about key attributes in terms of 4 different categories. There might be attributes of size, like, okay, wetlands, you have to have a certain number of wetlands, or they have to be distributed over a certain area. If they're not, then we wouldn't call wetlands feature healthy across the crown of the continent. These are examples of conditions. Landscape context might be, connectivity is a great example. You could have lots of wetlands, but if they're not connected, then maybe we would say wetlands are not healthy across the landscape. And then we have cultural. So this is especially for you guys with Mike and Sean. We really want to hear from you. What would be key attributes, culturally speaking, that would indicate that wetlands are healthy? For example, this came out of the CSKT Wetlands Conservation Plan. Culturally significant plants. Maybe there needs to be some level of presence, absence of certain plants, and if they're not there across a large area, then we could not say, oh, wetlands are healthy. So as we're working in your breakout groups, those assigned to the wetlands group will be focusing on your task will be to come in, look at these, and discuss which of these are the most important to measure. Because we can't. The idea of if you identify key attribute, the purpose of that is to develop a monitoring plan so we can monitor the health of this feature over the landscape. Obviously, we could not measure all of these across a large area. There's not enough resources. And so your idea is what would be if you had to pick 1 to 3 of these, you could, what would they be? The most important that would be sensitive to changes. If something bad happened, it would indicate to us, oh, something bad, they're not as healthy. And we'll have you vote. So we have these little voting icons. And again, this is just for the people online. You'll be talking and discussing in person there with Mike and Sean. And your facilitator will ask you to vote. You'll just drag these little things. And I think, okay, vegetation composition. Oh, I may need to move those behind. That should go. Anyway, they'll, in a minute, I'll make it so they can go on top. You'll vote. All right, I think vegetation composition is one of the most important things that could be measured to give us a sense of health, let's just say. And so you'll be asked to vote on that, and then we'll see just what floats to the top. And then you can have a discussion about that. Ideally, again, and you may see there may be some ideas you have that weren't listed in these management plans, and we'd encourage you to add them to these boxes. And if you need more boxes, you can use all the same features you would in a Word document. I'm going to hit Control D, which means to duplicate, or I could hit, copy, paste, that kind of thing, and you can add more. The idea is once you identify, top 3 or so, or 3 or 4, whatever you get, then you'll take those and you'll copy them into this next panel in the appropriate place. Here's a panel for the riparian area. The next one will be for aquatics and so forth. And you'll be copying those. Let's say if water chemistry, you decide that was super important and it's something that could be measured across the crown of the continent. And so you're going to, type in here or copy and paste, water, chemistry, whatever. And you'll type that in, and then your goal from here will be to identify what would you actually measure? What would you send a person out? What data would they collect in terms of an indicator? So, for example, the culturally significant plants, if that was an important key attributes, you might say, what would you measure? And I don't have a good background on that, but if the presence of muskrat or cattails or whatever the plant that is important, or the culturally muskrat's not a plant, excuse me. But whatever is a culturally important plant, maybe that's what you measure, because you probably can't measure all culturally significant plants. Maybe there's some indicator plants that could be measured across a broad region. So that's the idea, and your facilitators can help you with that. And they'll point you to different things. There's some information here to help, things to think about as you're developing those. After you develop a few of those, it'll probably be time for a break. And just while you're in breakout groups, your facilitator will say, all right, let's take a 5 or 10-minute break. And then you'll come back. Ultimately, as you have time, and I don't expect we'll get through a lot of this, the idea is ultimately to identify what does good look like. Okay, so going back to the culturally significant plants, let's say there's an important plant that is important, culturally, and you might say good. Well, what would good be? Meaning, we're saying it's in good shape. Well, maybe we want to be able to see that plant across 80% of all wetlands. That would be good, at least 80%. If we're only seeing it in 60 to 80% of the wetlands, we might call that fair. And if it's less than 60%, that we would say it's in really poor condition. So you'll be coming up with ideas of how to measure as best you can. And again, that's probably something that will continue after this meeting, that you may have talked to other people, look up literature, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's essentially what we'll be doing here. We're going to, if for facilitators, if we get to about 11:15 and you haven't taken a break, that's probably a good time to take a 5-minute break or so. Any questions on this? Again, the facilitators will guide you. I'd suggest when you get in, you might quickly introduce yourself. I mean, just say, hi, this is me, etc. Kelly, you have a question?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. It looks like Mary is responding here, but I put it in the chat, so I'll let you read it there.
Okay, super. Okay, well, if you think an aspect is missing or incomplete, for example, each of the 3 subject areas have invasive, exotic, aquatic biota, terrestrial invasive species can also be a substantial negative indicator depending on the species. Should this be incorporated into this indicator? Or is the intention to have that include in vegetative composition? Okay, so if you think an aspect is missing or incomplete, you can certainly add it. So maybe presence or absence of invasive or exotic species, that could work as an indicator. A lot of times I like to think in the positive sense of what needs to be present, but some teams decide, they say, oh, that is the key if it's invasive or aquatic. And so you could, if you decide that is a really, really good way of determining the health, go ahead and choose that. I also will say we'll all be in the same board, so we'll be in different breakout groups. You won't be able to hear each other speak, but you'll be able to see what others are doing. So look and see what others are coming up with. I don't know if I answered that fully. Did I fully answer that, Kelly? Okay, thumbs up, good. Mary, go ahead, you have a question?
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, yes.
Okay. The reason I think that's important is some of the work I've done with the EPA EMAP folks in Oregon is that the presence of non-natives in and of itself is a strong enough indicator to suggest potential vulnerability of an ecosystem. And it's a good early warning to pay attention. Sometimes it can get lost in species composition, whether it's flora or fauna. And I just know we did different metrics looking at the ratio of invasives to natives. You can really derive a lot of interesting, drive variables from certain things. So, and like Sean said, the blood pressure, it's a really strong blood pressure indicator. Sometimes just the presence, it may be a function of disturbance or it may not, but it's worth taking notice. So that was my only point. That's what I want to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Great. Appreciate that input. Kelly.
Not to get too deep in the weeds, sorry, but it does depend on the species and how much there is. There's a lot of variables here, but for example, invasive Phragmites into one of these systems could be devastating to an ecosystem, whereas some other species might not be that big an issue. So it's very species dependent and abundance dependent. Like some species, the sight of one would be horrifying, while others might be tolerant. The main thing I was getting at with my question is, are we also considering terrestrial species in addition to aquatic species in that context?
So that I'll leave that up to your team to figure out in your breakout group. That's, you guys are the experts. You can figure that out. And so that'll be a discussion for your breakout group. But yeah, great points. And to your point, Kelly, maybe you decide a key attribute is invasive species. What would you measure? What would the indicator be? Maybe it's presence of Phragmites, something like that. That might be an indicator of invasive species. But Allie, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify, when we're looking at the attributes, we're focusing on indicators of health and not indicators of stress. So I guess I'm just,
Correct.
you're not looking for, I don't know, like a stressor like density of roads or something like that that could be impacting it.
Great, good question. Yes, we'll show you more next Monday, but there's already been a lot of the pressures or threats or stress, however you want to call it, identified. And in fact, what we'll call, presence of roads is probably going to degrade one of these key attributes. That's really the connection. And so, no, we aren't interested right now in knowing what causes problems. We want to know how you would measure if it's healthy.
Okay.
Good,
Thanks.
good question. All right, Mary, do you have your hand up again, or is that still lingering like mine?
Sorry, I'll lower it. Oopsie.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, Lordy.
Let's go ahead and go into break. Maddie, are you ready to send us into breakout groups?
Yep, we should be all good. I
Okay.
can go and press
Go
that
ahead
one.
and open those up, and we'll see you guys on the other side. I'll just bounce between groups.
Sounds good. See y'all there.
And Mike and Sean, you guys won't be going into a group. You're just there. You can mute it. You should be alone in this session. But again, your job is to look at all three of these: aquatics, riparian, and wetlands, focusing on what your group knows best, which is especially how you would measure these in terms of cultural indicators and that kind of thing.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Valerie, do you see where to join? Okay, sounds good. See you there. I'm gonna make sure everyone gets in. Okay, all right, bye, Quinn.
All right, see ya.
Kind of construction oversight for our restoration projects here.
Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you.
And I am also a restoration ecologist for the Tribes Morning. I'm Gunnar Davies, work with restoring wetlands and as well as riparian areas along the Flathead Indian Reservation.
Excellent. I'm so grateful to have you both here. I have been long an admirer of the outstanding restoration work in wetlands that the tribes do for 20 years now. So I'm thrilled to have your expertise in the room. Others? So I just want to call out Steve, who just
rich species richness. We want to go ahead and put that in there.
You're back, Lynn. You are among us all.
All right.
You got cut out. All right. I think everybody's probably back in the room. If not, they'll be here very shortly. Obviously, that didn't feel like near enough time, right? As we expected. The main purpose here was to start this conversation and get you familiar with what we're trying to do. I'll leave it up to others to jump in and suggest what next steps with this particular exercise is. Mike, are you there? Can you hear us? I don't know if they're back with us. They may have turned it down. So we'll catch the. Can you hear us, Mike? Okay. All right. So what we wanted to do here for the next couple minutes is just get any feedback or reactions you have about the exercise. Any big epiphanies you had as you were discussing it? Any major challenges that you want to share with the group, either in audibly or in the chat? And the facilitators can jump in too if you feel like that you have a 30-second summary of what you got out of it.
Okay, I guess I'll jump in. That's Lynn. I do feel like we could definitely have used a lot more time in these discussions. I also feel like we were missing a piece on sort of context of space and just scale, of geographic scale and space and time of how we were going to look at these attributes. And I touched on this a little bit last week when we were getting ready for this about, when and where we would measure, not all places. And so it was hard to think about these measurements because they covered so many different types of, in our case, aquatic systems, that it's hard to sort of say, well, it's for this system or that system, and only on this place or that place. So we didn't get to that. But some of them are going to be more relevant than others for different systems.
Great. Yeah, good comment. I know as I was jumping between rooms, I know a lot of you were doing the right thing in terms of identifying first, what would you even what's important to measure? In your group, Lynn, water temperature. Great. That's important to measure. The next step's going to be refine that of how would you do that across the crown? Is it average water temperature in priority streams? What would the data be so that it could be analyzed? But that's kind of the next level after we come to agreement that yes, water temperature is important. So good. Other comments, thoughts, or struggles that you had?
I might jump in and say our group, I think we all could have used a lot more time as well. That always seems to be the way. We were in wetlands, and the things that could indicate the health of wetlands that folks were settling on included vegetation composition and culturally significant plants and invasive plants and noxious weeds, for example. And then really recognizing that for culturally significant plants, that there could only be broad conversations about those now because those are going to be unique to different tribal and First Nations, and really conversations that are highly sensitive and best led by them with what information they would or would not like to share. But we really appreciated the opportunity to have social and cultural pieces of what's important about wetlands come down into this discussion as well.
Great, thanks. Did somebody else have their hand up? Stuart, did you put your hand up? I didn't notice.
Sure, I could briefly chat. The Riparian group, I think, same boat. We were kind of just getting going, and we could have used a lot more time. Sean was very efficient at keeping us on track. There was a lot of convergence of ideas and concepts, so I think the group is working quite well. Some of these questions and issues are familiar, while some that are maybe a little bit new. So overall, I think it went pretty good. We need more time.
Great, thank you. Mike or Sean DeFrance, if you guys can hear me, do you have any report from your group? Oh, they may be in. They're having the prayer. Let's see if they come on. Sean, do you guys have a? Sorry to interrupt you. Any report you want to make out here, or we'll just summarize it next week?
Well, it would be interesting to think about principles.
Maybe we'll get the report next week. It might be easier to summarize when we hear. Okay, so a couple of things. So next week we'll get together to talk about strategies and actions being taken. We'll kind of have the same approach. Well, there will be less upfront material. There'll be more time in breakout groups, but we want to talk about strategies. And we will pre-populate, what is in the management plans and start the conversation there with the idea of thinking about what could be coalesced into crown-wide strategies and we'll get more into that next week. Sean, Finn, do you have anything you want to jump in here and send us off with?
Well, I just want to thank everyone again, everyone who participated. Mike and Sean, thanks so much for handling a big crowd, and hopefully you guys had a good time as well. we mentioned that we're going to be having a series of these workshops over the next 2 years. Now, they're not all going to be on wetlands and aquatics, right? We're going to talk about fur bearers and grizzlies. We're going to be talking about ungulates, right? And some of those other things on that list we talked about. So part of what we did today was we kind of checked out the proof of concept about can we do this either on Zoom or in groups with limited times. And I think we kind of touched on both those things, and we both know in person is better and more time is better. But I want to thank everyone for really getting after it and using the time that we had efficiently. We're meeting again on Monday. We'll have a little bit more time for kind of a self-evaluation. But I also want you all to recognize you don't solve problems that we're trying to tackle here, in a 3-hour session. And so the Crown Managers Partnership, the Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribes, and all of our partners that work together under this large umbrella of landscape scale conservation will continue to work together and provide this information. Mark, I had a lot more to talk about with your question, but let's meet next Monday, okay? So everyone, we'll see you again, 9 a.m. Mountain Time.
Great.
Monday
And
morning.
I was going to say, just because we're going to be doing this multiple times, I just sent a link into the chat. We'd love to hear any feedback of what worked well or what needs to be changed about this format, because we'll be together the next couple of weeks. Feel free to go in and just add any notes you have and we'll take that into account. Okay, I think that's it. We'll see you guys next week.